Welcome to SenseCheck by FundSense, the go-to resource for anyone working in asset management operations. This podcast series is hosted by senior members of the FundSense team, alongside industry practitioners with deep experience across asset management. We'll be breaking down key regulatory, operational, and industry developments shaping the industry and what they mean in practice. In each episode, we'll focus on the realities asset managers are facing today, from data management, fund reporting and disclosure to evolving investor communications, and share clear, practical insights to help you streamline your operations.
I'm Jamie Keane, founder of FundSense. This is episode 4 and my second as host, so I like to think I'm now a seasoned podcast professional. And talking of seasoned professionals, I'm thrilled to be joined by Mike Hilton, head of product practice at Investment Solutions Consultants. Welcome, Mike.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. Now, Mike, today we're going to be talking about partnerships between technology firms and consultants and why clients usually get the best outcomes when both sides work together properly. But before we get stuck into that, can you tell us a bit about yourself and the work you do at ISC?
Yeah, sure. I've been working in financial services for more than 30 years, actually. I'm quite an elderly man now. So I started investment banking and then worked in asset management about 25 years ago, and mainly in the change space. ISC, Investment Solutions Consultants, has a similar history to me. I've only been with them permanently 5 years, although I have worked for them on and off before that. But they were set up just over 20 years ago to provide change delivery to asset managers. So a boutique consultancy that does exactly that, helping investment managers, wealth managers, insurance companies with delivering change effectively through providing good project managers, program directors, business analysts, and so on, and the kind of level of skill that companies either don't have in-house at all or need augmentation for specific big programs. That's what we're doing in a nutshell. In terms of podcasts, this is my first, so guide me through it like Virgil in the underworld.
I'm sure we will we'll try and guide each other through as best we can, and a bit of an insight into what has already happened this morning. This time I have hit record, so thank you very much for your patience. And we've been lucky enough to work with you and the ISC guys from our very early days. So I'm very excited to have you on with me today. On to today's topic. Obviously, FundSense are on the technology side, and personally, I've spent my entire career on the vendor side. I've never worked for consultants, but what I've always tended to see is that where transformation projects fail, or at least succeed more slowly than they could or should, it's not because of the technology alone, or rarely is. Usually it's about, or at least in part, about a failure to fully understand the problem, the existing operating models, which then means starting with that incomplete picture of how to use technology to solve the problems. Is that your experience? Is that what you're seeing out in the market? And how do you see partnerships between software vendors and consultancies helping with that problem?
Yeah, I think that's spot on, actually. I mean, there's obviously a lot of technology solutions out there for either general purpose or specific solutions. There's a lot of commonality between processes in big asset managers and small asset managers, but it's not a one size fits all. I think what we'll often see is a client will know they've got a problem, but not necessarily know how to articulate the problem. They'll see that staff are either working ridiculous hours, or there's a lot of errors, a lot of costs coming up, or that something's just not fit for purpose. They just can't get the information they want at the time they want. And so as consultants, they'll ask us kind of, what's going on, and we can take a step back to look at the process. What are they actually trying to do here? What's working well? What isn't working well? Where will a technology solution help? And where is actually the solution you've got is fine. It's the way you're using it that's interesting. something around that, or what maybe it's the underlying data that's wrong. And so we'll typically work with a client to look at what they're ultimately trying to do, what's going on at the moment, who's making the decisions, and who's got the authority to do what, where, and what tools they're using, and help them to conclude on what they're actually intending to do. I mean, that's all kind of around the kind of is the solution appropriate at the moment? So, sometimes that can lead to an RFP type process of looking at different technology solutions, um, and sometimes they'll bring us after that decision has been made, and we can help them at that point, even bring in define use cases and so on, and try and build that connection between the data, the processes, the people, that will help the implementation succeed.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it's interesting, or I guess frightening, depending on your viewpoint, is that how often those sorts of things are missing. We often say to clients that we don't want to just automate bad processes, or indeed have to make assumptions or guesses on what those processes are when they're not documented. I mean, yeah, we can, even with a limited view to start with, we can make what we do have more efficient, we can add governance, etc. But we think firms are really missing a trick if they just do this, if they just try to make bad processes or missing processes more efficient. Our starting point in the discovery phase is always to encourage firms not to just tell us how things work today. We want them to tell us how they would like them to work in an ideal world, introducing them, I guess, to the art of the possible. A great idea in practice, right? But often clients don't have the resources or the time, or even sometimes the knowledge of the status quo to take that step back and address the operating model itself. And this is where we see consultants like yourself coming in, and that makes partnerships work because each side can focus on what they're best at. I mean, it sounds quite simple, really. Obviously, we know that the real world isn't always like that, but it's certainly a good starting point. For us, I think it's always good to be able to talk about real world examples of things like this, and where we've interacted together and with clients. And what we've seen over recent years is in projects like CCI and Aviate. Obviously, it's not really an asset management process without lots of acronyms. So there's two of them. I'm sure by now most people, whether they want to or not, know what CCI is. But Aviate was our own solution for assessment of value intelligent automation technology, something we built together. And when we did with this and the work we've done on CCI, I think broadly speaking, it was ISC who identified the operational challenges. FundSense were then helping to shape the technology solution, and then together we took it out to the market. But can you share from your side your experience of these initiatives, what we did, why we did it, any feedback that you got from clients?
Yeah, so my role at ISC is head of the product practice. So with that, we work with product teams within asset managers, fun enough, normally on projects like launching new fund ranges, specific funds, asset classes, stuff that either they've not done before, or they don't have the knowledge, or they don't have enough resourcing to do it. So they'll bring us in to help. And it tends to be quite specific things. Private assets is a good example of what's driven a lot of our work. In recent years, assessment of value was different because everyone had the same problem in the UK. At least the regulation came in, and all of our clients in product team normally hit the product team, where they were told they had to produce this very specific document to prove that all the funds in their range were providing value for money for their clients. This was a precursor to things like Consumer Duty and so on. So it's a fixed set of at least 7 criteria that funds were managed on, particularly things like price and performance and so on. But the data gathering was complicated. The organisation of getting the report together and taking it through various internal committees up to board level approval, Manco board approval, was complex and time consuming, and everyone had the same kind of core problem. So we identified this as a theme quite early on, that the first ones were crazy amounts of effort for some of our clients, and a crazy amount of resource within a what tends to be quite small product governance teams. And so it made sense for us to, we've got no interest in developing our own technology capability. There's only so far we could go with improving process, because ultimately it was a case of, passing data and information between one team and another, and trying to monitor that on spreadsheets and tick lists and emails was very, very difficult. So it made sense for us to work with you and effectively produce a set of requirements for a system that would enable clients to go through that process themselves. And the workflows that FundSense was able to deliver, with a nice neat screen with a tab at the top for each of the 7 criteria, and then a workflow showing where you were with each of the funds. So yeah, companies with big fund ranges, and some of our clients have got over 100 funds in their ROIC range. You could see where they were in the process for each fund, see where the red lights were, where things needed attention, and so on. And that's we kind of could really kind of mimic what product governance teams wanted to do, and then roll this product out to clients to actually show them you don't need to work 18 hours a day. You don't need to have your whole product team on hold while you put this thing together. You don't need to be working till 3 o'clock in the morning the day before a board meeting. You can just have a much more structured flow here. And I think you could the way FundSense could build something there that was actually immediately applicable to our clients, that we could then come in to a client and you could bring the technology and we could bring the business expertise, and it was very appealing to clients at that point.
Yes, I do recall it. It did resonate really well. I think the something worth pointing out was those weren't just examples you plucked out of thin air in terms of the 18-hour days and the headaches. I mean, these were things that you and us were hearing directly from some poor people in product who were having to do that to meet assessment of value deadlines. I do need to pull you up on one thing that you didn't mention. Just through all of the headaches that they were suffering, the amount of spreadsheets that they would have to manage. I have to shoehorn spreadsheets into conversations one way or another, but it was a really interesting project, because a lot, or at least a good amount of the work that we do at FundSense is a little bit reactive, to the extent that we need to understand first what a client is doing and how they're doing it before we can come up with the right solutions. This was one where we, with your not just input, but with you showed us exactly how to shape this. We could take it to the client and show we understood the problems before they'd really articulated them to us. So we've established that these partnerships make sense. I'm in a very happy place thinking about it. We'll see if things will turn slightly now. My next question is: do you see partnerships like this as being exclusive?
Who have you
I'm
seen?
sitting down, so I'm ready.
I do have other friends. It's true. You're obviously one of my better friends, but no, it's unusual. I think, and yeah, if they are exclusive, you may as well be the same firm. So, I think we need to maintain, or normally need to maintain, an element of independence, particularly if we're doing an RFP type process. So if a client calls us in to help them solve the problem, of inefficiency or control or so on, we we might think that you're the ideal solution to it. We might not. It depends what the problem is, and we talk to various vendors. If we're doing a formal RFP process, then clearly we have to be impartial there. And if there's any kind of conflict, if we're likely to carry on with the implementation, for example, we have to declare that as part of the RFP. I think the solutions that some of so sometimes larger consultancies in particular will have technology arms, and that does create a potential conflict of interest, in my opinion, when you're just assessing what the most suitable solution to a particular problem is. And so I think it's actually a credit to our model, that we do have that independence, that we are able to look across the market really and see what's the best solution to a particular problem at a particular time, and considering their both client need as much as the capability and the scale of the solution. And I kind of assume I'm maybe gearing myself up for tears here, but I kind of assume that works both ways. I mean, you work with some of our competitors.
We do, and at least, this way we'll both be crying by the end of this answer. So that's something. But yes, we do. And your answer, it makes perfect sense, and it has to be that way, because without that level of integrity, none of this work, as you say, we would be seen as one company, and that just wouldn't make sense. So there has to be that flexibility. What we see on our side, clients already sometimes have a consultancy on retainer, or one that they've already bought in or have previously bought in for big projects. And as we know, the onboarding process is sometimes painful at a vendor side. So sometimes it's just easier to use somebody they have used in the past. In the same way that I'm sure you've seen exactly the same. A particular vendor has been used in the past and then will be used again. And you touched on a subject there that is, shall we say, close to my heart. We often see with the bigger consultants, shall we say, that they are often front and center, particularly when there is a build or buy technology decision, which strangely often then lead to an entirely objective build decision that will happen to be led by that same consultant. But on the subject of the bigger guys, the big guns in the industry, what do you see as the benefits for asset managers of working with a boutique consultancy like our ISC, rather than just always going to the big guns?
So I mean, it's a different proposition, really. I think bucketing us in the same category is perhaps a bit of a mistake. I mean, all of our consultants are very experienced in the market. They've worked normally, sometimes at other consultancies, but more normally within change teams or technology teams of asset managers or insurance companies and wealth managers in the past. Got a track record there already, and a good reputation, and bring that level of experience of different organisations to answer the question. So when you're talking to a sort of smaller consultancy or boutique consultancy like us, then you're getting someone that's kind of been there, worn the t-shirt, done the business, and we're normally kind of pretty embedded in organisations. So I mean, the work we do is quite varied. We sometimes do very short-term piece of work where we'll drop in and do something, of a sort of assessment or an opinion, but more normally we're in a firm for a period of time through a delivery process, and that in doing that we get a very detailed, in-depth understanding of how a firm works. Um, who does what, how does the governance work, who makes the decisions, how does funding work, what does the data model look like, what do the team structures look like, how, who will this, who's got the problem and who's going to be impacted by the solution. And that's the kind of specialist knowledge that I think we can bring, and make sure that the technology solution we're building actually solves the problem that the clients come to in the first place.
Well, that's certainly our experience of working with you. I think you used the word embedded there, and I think that's been really helpful for us when we've needed to get an understanding. Sometimes we need to get answers quickly to something, and the fact that your guys are so well embedded, you have that deep understanding of what's going on, that we can interact with you and get those responses. And because of your understanding of what we do, you know how to frame those answers as well. From the asset manager's side as well, what we've seen is that deep understanding, the fact that you guys have lived and breathed these problems. I mean, you're able to give that much more bespoke, I guess, consultancy, rather than the more templated answers that they may get from some of the bigger firms. So once we've got everything in place, once there's a project in play, how far do you see, not just work with FundSense, but these kind of partnerships in general, how far do you see that they can go?
It's a bit of a that joke, isn't there, about asking an accountant, an economist, and a surveyor how high a church spire is, and the surveyor gets his measuring tools, and the accountant does something else, and the economist says how high do you want it to be, and it's not very funny, is it? But anyway, but the point really is, it can go as far as you like. I think sometimes we can simply do the RFP and give a recommendation and then hand it over to internal change teams to do, and I think perhaps that's worth conversation in itself. What quite often happens is that we'll come in and help with the assessment, defining the problem and defining a solution, and having worked with the client to that point, will typically be retained right through the implementation, um, and right through prototyping, testing, and testing in terms of kind of the idea, as well as the what you traditionally think of as testing, as kind of the functionality and technical type testing and user acceptance testing, and right through to hand off to a business as usual team, and then off they go with it, and the solutions there. So it really varies quite a lot. Typically we'll be there end to end. I think as part of our model of kind of embedding in organizations, we will often be there right from start to finish, and there's obvious advantages to that, because we'll see the whole background and purpose of the implementation of the solution, and then have a good understanding of both the problem and the way that the solution deals with it. And I guess from your point of view, does it make life easier if you've got continuity of people there, or does it not really make that much difference?
Oh no, it's critical. I think it's always a big risk when there isn't that continuity, that transfer of knowledge. So yeah, it's on our wish list. That would be very high to have that continuity. And I think another really important thing, and where it helps to work with flexible firms on both sides, is that ideally there shouldn't be this rigid handoff between consultancy and vendor. It probably should be ongoing. We know from our experience how tech projects fail when the operational framework isn't clear, when there isn't that consistency in terms of who you're dealing with. We've lived through that. It was in our very early days at FundSense, where a client had like a failure to provide resources on the business side in terms of the knowledge of the processes, no PM resource, no BA resource, or even the senior management oversight that we needed, which I guess led to an inability to articulate the operating model, which led to delays, us having no choice but to make assumptions about the processes, and then nobody there to validate these assumptions we're making them, and then that ultimately led to them canning the project, which was a steep learning curve, a tough time for us. So to have that continuity on that side would have been critically important for us. I think things would have gone very differently. I do remember, we were saying at the time, and certainly in hindsight, just how much that project was crying out for consultancy oversight.
Yeah, I guess a lot of clients are kind of, particularly, the pressure on margins and so on. They're not flush with cash, and they consultancy looks like an obvious place to cut costs, and in a lot of places it is. It's often wasted money of high daily rate consultants without a specific role, which is obviously crazy. But I think that's a very good example of where there is a specific need. It's that for most implementations, clients will use at least some external implementation capability, a team that will understand the software that's being brought in, and the problem that's being solved, and that it's a temporary uplift. I mean, if you're keeping consultants in place for years and years, there has to be a good reason to do that, and that does happen. There might be continuous streams of projects and pieces of work to do that. But in general, a project is a temporary thing, and once the system is implemented, then the staff can go. So resourcing it internally, unless there's a continuous cycle of things to move on to, then it does make sense to bring people out. I think, one of the things that attracted me to project management as a job in the first place is that concept of, you've just got one job to do. All I care about is the project I'm working on. I think when there's general people that have got all sorts of things going on in their heads, and when particularly if operational teams are expected to do these kind of implementations, and they've got all the sort of fires burning that you get in a day-to-day business, and just don't have the time to dedicate to the implementation, let alone the specialist knowledge and stuff that's needed to it. That focus that an external team can bring without all the noise of the rest of the business going on around them can be very helpful.
Yes, it makes so much sense. I mean, I'm certainly sold on the need for for consultants and vendors to work together. But putting the sales hat on, or using the old sales phrase, handling objections, I'm sure it's something that you have heard in the past from clients, and I'm going to ask you it today. Is that isn't this something that firms can just take care of themselves?
I mean, to that point, I think it does have to be an appropriate partnership. So I guess there's examples where they absolutely can. If the firm has got um, capacity in their change team or their implementation teams and their business teams to do the work, then yes, they can. I think in our experience that's there. I think the example you gave there was quite a good example. You normally do see some sort of external expertise in an implementation. Um, for that very reason, it's that expertise that they need, the size of the team while it's being introduced. If things like testing, for example, it, there's often not a good structured testing methodology in an organization, and the testing in terms of user acceptance testing is a a very general term, but ultimately we need to make sure that this solution is actually meeting the needs of the guys on the ground doing it, and that quite often takes a certain amount of external expertise to look at in the wider sense of, yes, the day-to-day functionality works in terms of the definition, it does what it's supposed to do, but in terms of actually solving the problem, that understanding of the need, and to look at it in a different way to perhaps the guy on the desk who's just swamped with the spreadsheets um, and the senior management that's just getting information that's meaningless to them. Is it actually solving those problems? And I think that's the kind of expertise that doesn't typically exist within an organization. And that's aside from the simple numbers of bodies that you need to temporarily bring in to do these kind of implementations.
Yes, yeah, I completely agree. And I think not only does it help to look beyond the guy who is swamped in all of these things, but often that same person has been doing things the same way for, in some cases, I'm sure we know people at asset managers who've been doing the same thing for 20 years, and it's
Mm.
worked well. But to have that external view of, is it the right way? Have things moved on? Are there better ways of doing it? I think are really important as well. And uh, in the spirit of talking about new ways of doing things, I think we both done very well to get this far in. I mentioned spreadsheets once, but I don't think either of us have mentioned AI at all. So probably that's a good place to start to round things off. How does, in your opinion, AI change all of this, Mike? Do we start looking for new jobs now, or do we have a bit of time left yet?
You see how it is. I mean, everyone's talking AI, aren't they? I mean, we're having a conference on it quite soon, but the it doesn't change the fundamental parts of the business, but it does, in terms of, what do investment managers do? They make sure that customers have got savings that meet their needs. Summarize the whole industry in one sentence there. In terms of implementation, I think it accelerates the process, really, the whole process. Coding is obviously quick. I mean, I know that's your field rather than mine, so I might be making this up a bit. Testing can be quicker. You can give a prompt and it'll produce a test plan. I think at the moment there's still a very much I feel that you need a human in the loop for a lot of these things, and I think that will persist for a long time. Actually, I think when you look across AI across the world in general, people feel a lot more comfortable if there's a person somewhere, even if there's evidence to suggest that it's better if there's no people anywhere. But I think that. Um, stuff like requirements building, and the documentation type processes that can take a lot of time, and also expertise. I mean, I think we you don't find people that spend all of their time doing productive work. There's always that thing of, oh, if we could get an office junior to do this, or I spend so much of my time building spreadsheets, copying and pasting spreadsheets, doing macros, and so on. I don't have time to do my proper job. Now, AI will do a lot of those kind of admin things, enabling people to actually do their proper job. So I think, at the end of the day, I think it's, from a consultancy point of view, yes, it does change things. I worry for the industry about entry level work. I mean, yeah, as you know, I have children of that age of starting their careers, and it's difficult to know how to guide them through that. And there's obviously huge challenges here, but there's obviously also huge opportunity to actually accelerate stuff. The multi-year programs, I think, could be compressed quite a lot by really just being able to get some of the documentation and processes done much more quickly. The time consuming work, the administration, and so on, reduces quite a lot. So I see it accelerating our work rather than replacing our work. But the way that's going to evolve is going to be quite challenging. And I guess on your side as well. I mean, are you already using AI for coding work, or is that
We
anything new?
are. I mean, yes, we're using it more and more, but our use, and I guess our philosophy aligns a lot with what you're saying. It's used primarily to make a lot of the back end processes more efficient, but also the processes that we provide to clients more efficient. So it's not replacing, for example, workflows. It's an overlay to workflows to learn from where tasks are being done, where they can be made more efficient. So much as a lot of our work has been making people's roles more enjoyable, shall we say? Maybe that's pushing it a little bit, but we work with so many teams who are bogged down in, yes, spreadsheets, spending a lot of their time copy and pasting data, trying to manipulate data, staying on top of 20 tab spreadsheets. So much as we've been able to make that experience for them better rather than replacing them, just giving them the ability to add value in their roles rather than just number crunching, copy and pasting, etc. We're seeing AI doing the same, just improving the processes, learning from where data's going, where things can be made more efficient. So it's improving things for FundSense, it's improving things for our clients. And I'm really pleased to be able to say that we're not seeing that leading to replacement of people, just changing their roles, which is a nice place to be. I think that almost brings us to the end. I've certainly learned a lot, so thank you. If nothing else, I've learned to always double check to hit the record button when you are starting to do a podcast. But any concluding remarks, Mike? Any words of wisdom to leave us with?
Yeah, I think it's it has been an interesting conversation actually. I think it's unusual to actually take a bit of time out to actually think why do we work together? Why is it beneficial? And when we do stuff, I mean, I think the scale of our organisations is similar, and that's quite helpful. The kind of clients that we work with are generally quite similar in terms of generally large asset managers. I think, to misquote Alan Partridge, you can get a mismatch of youth hostling with Chris Eubank, which is not what you really want to end up with. These partnerships will endure. I think the piece on AI at the end there was interesting. That how are we all dealing with AI? I can see that being kind of a big change agent, but doesn't really change the fact that we are the kind of firms like ours are complementary to each other in quite a number of ways.
Well, absolutely, and long may our non-exclusive partnership continue. And just before we go, where can people find out a bit more about ISC?
Probably our website, www.iscltd.com.
Marvelous. Well, thank you very much. I think there's nothing left for me to say except thank you very much for joining me today, Mike.
Thank you, Jamie. Chat soon.
And thank you everyone for listening. This has been SenseCheck from FundSense. See you next time.
That brings us to the end of this episode of SenseCheck by FundSense. If you found it useful, subscribe to stay up to date with the regulatory and operational changes shaping asset management. Thanks for listening. Please join us for the next episode of SenseCheck, coming soon.